and welcome to Narayana IAS. I'm Pratik, your faculty for Daily News Analysis. Now students, in today's session, let's focus on the 5 most important topics from the Hindu and the Indian Express. So let's have a quick brief about the topics that we shall be discussing in today's session. The first topic is taken from Hindu page number 6. Now in this article, understand the need of India to formulate national security strategy. Like, which are the challenges India is facing which pushes India to formulate a comprehensive national security strategy. This is what we are going to discuss in the first article. The second article we have taken from Indian Express page number 10. Now recently, Joint Commander Conference was held. Now this Joint Commanders Conference is a platform to deliberate on the important national security issues. And who is going to deliberate? The top military commanders of 3 wings: Army, Navy and Air Force. So we'll understand about the importance of the Joint Commander Conference. The third article we have taken from Indian Express page number 15. Now in this article we are going to understand about the periodic labor force survey for both the rural and urban areas, which was introduced by the Ministry of Statistics. The fourth article we have taken from Indian Express page number 1 and 9. So we have clubbed 2 articles. So in this article we'll understand about what is Quad and the outcome of the recently held Quad summit in the US. And the fifth article we have taken from Indian Express page number 9. Now in this article we are going to understand about the outcome of the recent India USA meet. So these are the 5 articles that we'll be discussing in today's session. And finally, we shall be discussing few practice questions so that you understand if you have understood all the 5 topics. So students, let's get started. Students, the title of the first topic is India needs a national security strategy. So as discussed in the introduction, we'll understand about the national security strategy, need, challenges and the way forward. Right? And you can mark this under GS paper 2 as well as GS paper 3. So under GS paper 2 we have governance and policy making related to national security. So when it comes to national security, who makes the policies? It is the government, right? And from the GS 3 perspective, the security challenges, technology and economic development, right? Now a previous question was asked in the year 2022 on the different elements of cyber security, right? So as security or as a topic of security is always in the news, there's a high chance that the UPSC might ask a question on national cyber security, or for that matter, the need to develop a comprehensive security strategy, right? So what is the context? India requires a comprehensive national security strategy, which means as of now we do not have a national security strategy, comprehensive, right? Now why is it that we need to frame or have a national security strategy? Because to address the evolving geopolitical landscape, which means because of the global and because of the regional challenges, or because of the multitude challenges India is facing, both external as well as internal. That's the reason it is very important that we frame a national security strategy which should be comprehensive. Alright, and for that we have to integrate defense, economic and diplomatic priorities. We'll understand more about these points in the next slide, right? So with regional instability and economic ambitions at stake, regionally, Pakistan, China, right? Then unfriendly Maldives, right? So these regional instability and the economic ambition at stake. Why? Because of the Russia-Ukraine war, because of the Israel-Gaza war, because of the tensions in the Middle East, right? It is very important that the national security strategy streamline the resource allocation and set a clear direction for the country. And for that we have to balance multi-alignment. We need to be prepared and economic resilience. These are very, very critical for India's security and international standing. Which means, in short, the context is that because of the multitude challenges India is facing, we need to develop a comprehensive national security strategy. Now we'll understand more about what we discuss in the context. What exactly do you mean by national security strategy? It is a comprehensive policy document. It's a document, right? It's a document that defines nation's security objectives and outlines strategies to achieve them. So, which are our country's objectives, right? National security, right? Environmentally, we need to be sustainable, right? Border security, again, it's a part of national security. So, the national security strategy or the document defines which are the objectives of our nation's security and how are we going to achieve our objectives, right? Like, for example, when you prepare for the UPSC examination, you have a strategy. For example, when it comes to prelims, you have a different strategy. For mains, you have a different strategy, etc. Right? So, which means your goal is to clear prelims. So, you have a different strategy for prelims. Then you have a different strategy for clearing mains, right? Same is the case with our country, right? So, national security is the objective of our country. Now, to achieve national security, which are the strategies India is going to focus is something that is defined in the document. Now, the document, right, it covers a wide range of security dimensions. See, national security is not only related to military. It covers various dimensions like military, economic, cyber and environmental threats. Which means if we are to secure our country, one, our military needs to be strong, our economy should be progressive, growth should be sustainable, cyber security and environmental, we need to be sustainable. Now, the strategy integrates these aspects, which means the national security strategy integrates these aspects like the economic, military, cyber and environmental threats into a cohesive framework, which means whenever we are framing a national security strategy document, we include these elements, right, so that we prepare a robust, a very comprehensive document. And this document, it addresses both the traditional as well as the non-traditional security challenges. Which are the traditional security challenges? The border disputes, right? The arms smuggling, terrorism. These are the traditional challenges. Non-traditional challenges, water scarcity, then pandemics, climate change. These are the non-traditional security challenges, which means whenever we formulate a national security strategy, we make sure that we are encompassing or involving both the traditional as well as the non-traditional security challenges, right? Now, whenever prepare a document, this is how it should look like, which means every national security strategy document should have these elements: introduction and objectives. What is the objective of this document, right? The objective is to secure our national borders, to make our environment sustainable, to make sure the economy is growing, to make sure the social and economic condition of the people of our country is progressing. This is the objective. Threat assessment. Then in the document, we also analyze the threats that our country is facing. For example, we analyze the regional threats, the global threats, right? For example, border disputes, terrorism and cyber threats. Then we define short-term and long-term goals. Short-term, which are the areas we have to focus immediately. Then we also prepare a long-term policy or planning. For example, when you prepare for your examination, for the weekly test, you have a short-term goal. Then for the UPSC examination, you have long-term goal. Same is the case with our national security. Resource allocation, right? Now you need to plan the resources and allocate the resources as per the need of different ministries or different departments, right? So you have to plan for military, technological and economic resources needed to implement this strategy, right? Which means you have to make sure that military has adequate resources. Then we have sophisticated technology, and this is only possible when the economy is growing, right? Implementation mechanism. Who is going to implement the objectives that we have decided for a country? Which are the, let's say, security agencies? For example, Indian military, we have Indian military, then we have the Central Armed Police Forces. So, which agency would have which role and responsibilities is something that will be a part of this document. And then we will be having periodic reviews, right? So, outline process for periodic reviews, which means based on the changing time, we make sure that we are updating the document. Which document? The National Security Strategy document, right? For example, India does not have a National Security Strategy document, but developed countries like US, UK, Russia, China, also, I mean, these are the developed nations, of course, but again, our arch rival, Pakistan, they also have their own National Security Strategy document, which means, given the threats we are facing, it is very important that we have a National Security Strategy document, right? The question is, why does India need a National Security Strategy? The point that we discussed in brief in the context. Now we'll discuss in detail. 1. The geopolitical shifts. Rising tensions with China and unstable relations with Pakistan require a clear strategic posture. Now, we all know that we have tensions with China, border disputes, right? We have a border dispute with China. At the same time, we have regional tension with China in the Indo-Pacific region. For example, both India and China are fighting each other to have dominance in the Indo-Pacific or the Asian region, right? And then our unstable relations with Pakistan. Now, if we look at other neighbors, right? Maldives, or let's say Sri Lanka, or let's say Bangladesh. Now, our relation with these nations are very fragile, very weak, which means we never know how the relation might turn, right, with these neighboring countries. So, we had to make sure that we include all these elements in our National Security Strategy document, right? So, the purpose is to have a clear strategic posture. Given the challenges we are facing, both with our neighbors as well as regionally and globally, it is very important that we have a clear strategic posture. Second, economic resilience. Now, it is very important for our country to protect economic interest. Why? Because we know that we are facing many challenges, right? Globally as well as regionally. Now, if you are facing so many challenges, we have to give more resources. We need more money to make our military strong, isn't it? If we have to spend more money for our military, we need money. And only when the economy of our country is strong, we can allocate more resources to the military. And that's the reason we have to protect our economic interest, right? For example, when it comes to critical minerals, be it critical minerals, copper, lithium, gallium, germanium. Now, these are some of the critical minerals that is very, very important for our country. So, if we do not get these minerals, right, the economy might suffer of our country, right? And we are actually dependent on foreign countries for the import of these critical minerals. Right? That's the reason we have to protect our economic interests. For example, let's say if there's a war or the ongoing war between Israel, Iran, Hamas, right? Because of this war, the global supply chain gets affected, right? If the global supply chain gets affected, then the industries of a country that are dependent on these minerals, their industries or their factories might come to a standstill, right? The functioning might stop. Why? Because there is no import of the critical minerals. So we have to protect our economic interests for the growth of our economy. Third, technological advancement. We have to address the cyber threat, cyber war, right? And enhance technological capabilities, which means we have to make sure that the cyber security of a country is very, very strong. For that, we have to invest more in the technological upgradation that we secure our cyber system. Comprehensive security, which means the national security strategy would streamline policies across ministries. For example, we have the defense ministry, then we have the foreign ministry, then we have the commerce ministry, right? So it is very important that the policies of these different ministries should be streamlined, right? So that we have a holistic response to deal with different challenges. For example, we cannot work in isolation, like defense ministry is working in isolation, foreign ministry, home ministry, commerce ministry. It cannot work in isolation. They have to work together, which means that policies need to be streamlined so as to have a holistic approach to deal with the challenges. These are the reasons why we need a national security strategy. Once we have a national security strategy, what are the benefits that India will have once we have a national security strategy? One, the national NSS, I'll refer NSS. Now, the NSS will lead to coherence, and it will align the defense, foreign policy and economic strategies, which means the defense, as I told you in the last slide, that we cannot work in isolation. There has to be a coherence between the defense ministry, foreign ministry and the commerce ministry, which means we have to ensure that the country is working towards a common goal, common security goal, right? For that, coherence is very important between different ministries and departments, right? So these are the benefits that we will have, which means whenever we make a policy or national security strategy, NSS will make sure that the policies are integrated, which means all these ministries and different departments under these ministries are working in a coordinated way. Next, resource efficiency. Now, the NSS will help our country to identify and prioritize the sectors which need more resources, right? Once we have a NSS, we'll understand, okay, this is a sector that needs more resources, which means we have to prioritize this sector more. For example, let's say, as we are facing many challenges from Pakistan, China, let's say tomorrow the relation with Bangladesh might get spoiled or might come under strain, which means west, north and east, we are actually facing enemies. Why? Because of change in government in Pakistan. Maybe post-election, Bangladesh might get a government which is not in friendly terms with our country. The Bangladesh Nationalist Party, they are not friendly disposed with our nation, which means if the BNP comes to power, our relation with Bangladesh might come under some sort of strain, which means here west, east and north, we are facing an enemy. Now, it's obvious for a country to invest more in the defense, right? Though investing in education and health are equally important, but the priority is to protect our country. So here we allocate resources to defense more than in health and education. Why? Because if our country is safe, we can protect our people. If our country is not safe, we cannot protect our people, right? That's the reason we have to first prioritize our needs. Then enhance strategic clarity. Now, the NSS will help to provide a clear framework for addressing the internal and external threats. Which are the external threats? China, Pakistan, right? The global tensions, Israel, Hamas, Russia, Ukraine, right? These are the external threats. Piracy, terrorism, right? So, these are the external threats. Internal threats, the Northeast insurgency, Jammu Kashmir, terrorism, Naxalism. These are the internal threats, which means NSS will provide a clear framework. Okay, these are the internal threats, these are the external threats, and both these are related. They might be related, they might not be linked, right? Then, once we have a NSS, this will actually strengthen our international posture in the world. It will reinforce India's role as a responsible global power. These are the benefits that we'll have once we formulate NSS. The question is, if our country is facing so many challenges, why is it that we have failed so far to develop a NSS? First is the political sensitivities. Once we have a NSS, we'll understand about the vulnerabilities and gaps in our security. As of now, if you ask any common person, they might not know which are the gaps in our security apparatus. But once the NSS is released, the people of our country would get to know, okay, these are the security challenges that we are facing. These are the gaps that we have. For example, most of the weapons or like majority of the weapons are outdated, right? Or the manpower shortage. So, these are the vulnerability or gaps existing in the system, right? And once the NSS release, all these gaps might get revealed as well, right? Now, this will lead to political and public backlash, which means the opposition political party will pounce on it. They will try to sensitize the national security issues. The things which are important for the national security might get more and more controversial. That's the reason the political leadership is refraining from formulating a NSS, right? Next is resource limitation. Now, here we have to balance our defense need with our developmental needs. For example, it is very important that we invest in defense as well as health, education, environment, etc. Because if you are only investing in defense, like what Pakistan does, the health of the people of the country will suffer. Education, no education, environmental threat. Now, if a person has no access to health, has no access to education, is suffering because of the harmful pollutants, then directly or indirectly that person will become a security challenge or risk to the country, right? Which means extremism and development are closely linked. Let me give the example of Naxalism. Now, because of lack of development in the tribal region, right, the people in the tribal region, they rose and they led a rebellion against the Indian government, which means development and extremism are linked or related. So, here it is very important for a country to balance the defense needs as well as the developmental needs. Third, dynamic security landscape. Rapid changes in global and regional security dynamics can make long-term planning challenging. You can make a plan when you have a defined or when your goal and objectives are very clear. But the world is changing very fast, right? For example, Russia-Ukraine war, Israel-Hamas war. Tomorrow maybe India and China might fight a war or might have more border disputes. So, as the global and regional security is changing very fast, it is difficult or it becomes very difficult to have a long-term planning, right? And then institutional coordination. When I say that the different ministries have to work together, there has to be coordination, right? Now, this is not as easy as we see. Why? Because of the bureaucratic hurdles, and every ministry will have a different priority, right? And because of the bureaucratic hurdles, the coordination might not seem that easy as we speak. Right? So these are some of the challenges which is stopping India from formulating a NSS. Getting my point? Now, we have these committees, right, that attempted to formulate NSS. For example, the Kargil Review Committee recommended structural reforms in the defense and intelligence sector after the Kargil War. Naresh Chandra Task Force suggested reforms for national security management and intelligence. Then we have the Huda Committee. So the thing is, for prelims, it is important to remember the names. In the mains too, let's say for example, in prelims a question can be of this nature. Naresh Chandra Task Force, recently seen in the news, is related to which sector? Economy, defense, foreign, education, etc. So you should know this Naresh Chandra Committee was established for which sector. Now we'll understand the Huda Committee. Now Huda Committee suggested the following for India's NSS. 1. Global positioning, which means India has to engage with global powers based on strategic autonomy, which means we have to align with the global powers like US, Russia. Now, aligning with these countries doesn't mean you compromise on our independence or strategic autonomy. No. Here, for example, when it comes to facing China, now China is a big power. It is not possible for India to deal with China alone. That's the reason what we do is we align with USA, Japan. We work with these countries to control or prevent China from flexing muscles. So here we have to engage with global power. Second, regional stability. Now India has to ensure that the region is stable. So we have to do everything to make the region stable. For example, when it comes to Kashmir, we have to make sure that the situation in Jammu and Kashmir is improving, which means we have to make sure that people have no reason to complain, which means we have to make sure that the government invests sufficiently for the social and economic development of the people in Jammu and Kashmir, right? Which means Jammu and Kashmir needs to have regular elections, right? The social and economic condition of the people has to improve, which means people should have no reason to fight. The living standard has to be enhanced. Then internal security. Strengthen policies for regions like Jammu and Kashmir and Northeast. For example, we are holding elections in Jammu and Kashmir. Why? We are a democratic nation. So to make sure that the leaders of Jammu and Kashmir are elected by the people of Jammu and Kashmir. Right? Now, unfortunately, elections have not been held in Jammu and Kashmir for almost 10 years now. Right? So we have to make sure that Jammu and Kashmir sees development. Northeast. So Northeast, the insurgents in Northeast, again, these people are fighting against the Indian government. So we have to make sure that we focus on the social development, economic development, tribal development, so that people have no reason to fight, right? And then most importantly, the technology and cyber capabilities. We have to enhance cyber infrastructure and establish dedicated cyber commands so as to ensure that our cyber security is strong. Cyber security is strong. This is what Huda Committee recommended. Now, future directions. We have to prioritize flexibility. Now, NSS, it doesn't mean that once you formulate NSS, it's final. No. You have to have flexibility, which means as per the changing regional and global landscape, you also change your NSS, right? Second, enhance technological capabilities. Make sure that you're investing in the technology. For example, we have artificial intelligence, machine learning, then we have quantum computing, etc. Then strengthen regional partnership to ensure that the region is stable and safe. For example, you align with the South Asian countries. You can reinvigorate SAARC, work on SAARC, work on BIMSTEC, right? Then BBIN, Bangladesh, Bhutan, India, Nepal. These are some of the regional frameworks that India has to work and to make sure that the region is stable. And then last, focus on comprehensive strategy, which means whenever we are making a comprehensive strategy, we do not focus only on the military. we are focusing on economic development, social development, environmental development, right? So that the social and economic condition of the people enhances and our national security becomes more robust, right? So this is all about the national security strategy. I hope students you understood each and every dimension that we have discussed in the first article, right? Students, the next article and the title of the next article is In Our Defense. So in this article, we'll understand about the importance of Joint Commanders Conference, and also we'll understand about the Integrated Theatre Command, right? ITC. You can map this under GS paper 2, that is the policies the government frames for the national security, as well as GS 3 we have security and defense, right? A PYQ. What are the maritime security challenges in India? Discuss the organizational, technical and procedural initiatives taken to improve maritime security. So, organization, technical and procedural initiatives you need to understand. What is the context? Recently, Joint Commanders Conference was held and it was chaired by India's Defence Minister Rajnath Singh. Now, this JCC, Joint Commanders Conference, joint which means the Joint Commanders Conference of the Army, Navy and Air Force. Joint Commanders Conference, right? Now, this Joint Commanders Conference, JCC, is a platform to enhance deliberations, discussions on national security, which means the military commanders of Army, Navy and Air Force would come together to discuss the national security challenges or discussions on the national security. Now, this topic we are going to highlight the concerns or the state of the Indian military, the challenges the Indian military is facing with respect to modernization, equipment shortages, and how does politics influence the military affairs in our country. Let's start. First of all, we know that recently Joint Commanders Conference was held. You should wonder what is the significance of Joint Commanders Conference. 1. Strategic coordination. The JCC provides a platform for unified deliberation, right? So here, the military commanders of Army, Navy and Air Force would come together, sit across the table and discuss about the national security, which means it enhances strategic alignment in defense planning. So, whenever we plan about defense, it's not only about Army, Navy or Air Force, we are planning about the joint command, right? We are planning about the defense or Indian military, right? Which means, or let me give you an example. In the 2019 Balakot airstrike, right? We experienced that there's no effective coordination between Indian Army and the Indian Air Force. Now, this was a joint operation led by the Indian Army and the Indian Air Force. But somehow the review post the 2019 Balakot airstrikes led to the understanding that we need to have more coordination between different branches of the Indian Army. And that's the reason this JPC provides a platform for the leaders to come together and to align their strategy with the defense planning. 1. Strategic coordination. How do you coordinate between different branches? Second is complement to CCC. What is CCC? The Combined Commanders Conference. Now, this Combined Commanders Conference is led by the Prime Minister. JCC, Defense Minister. CCC, Prime Minister. Now, this Combined Commanders Conference, it focuses on broader security issues. Which are broader security issues like the Indo-Pacific, border dispute. So, here under the CCC, that is Combined Commanders Conference, which is led by the Prime Minister, it focuses on broader security issues. Like, for example, the things going on in the Indo-Pacific. the border dispute between, let's say, India, China, right? The JCC allows the defense minister to directly engage with military leadership. Now, this under JCC, the defense minister would directly talk to the military commanders on specific operational and professional matters. For example, let's say in the CCC, broader security issues like the challenges in the Indo-Pacific region are discussed. But in the JCC, right, which is chaired by the defense minister, in JCC, we discuss on how many troops or which all equipments, which all defense equipments we need to deploy in the Indo-Pacific region. For example, we need how many submarines, we need how many aircraft carriers, we need how many fighter jets ready to deal with the challenges in the Indo-Pacific region. Which means when it comes to the operational part, the functional part, how do we deploy, how many to deploy, right? This is what we discuss in the JCC. This is the difference. Third, civil military integration. Now, it strengthens the civil military relations by allowing informed and nuanced discussions on defense policies, operational readiness and resource allocation. Now, here the military and the political leadership, defense minister and the defense minister Rajnath Singh and the military commanders, that is the military chiefs of Army, Navy and Air Force, would come together, sit together and have informed and nuanced discussions. For example, let's say Agnipath scheme. Let's say the army is saying that we are short of manpower. Okay, the political leadership says, okay, through Agnipath scheme, we'll recruit more and more soldiers. But then now the Indian army or the military or the army chief says that, okay, these are the problems in the recruitment scheme. Please rectify these things. Which means here, this JCC provides a platform for the political leadership and the military leadership to have informed discussion, right? Then addressing operational gaps. It provides an opportunity to address existing operational and infrastructural gaps. For example, let's say the Siachen Glacier, right? Now, the gears, the clothes that the Indian army men have to use to look after the Siachen Glacier, we do not have that equipment, that gear, right? And there's a reason. For example, let's say the sophisticated gears, the modern gears that we actually import from the European continent. Now, in case we are finding or falling short of the gears, then this is a platform where the political leadership and military leadership can sit together to address the operational and the infrastructural gaps. Infrastructural gaps, be it, let's say, for example, with respect to Navy. Maybe the submarine is lacking with respect to the capability to deal with the challenges in the Indian Ocean or let's say in the Bay of Bengal region. Which means all the infrastructural or the operational gaps is something that the political and the military leadership would discuss at the JCC. This is the importance of JCC. I hope you understood. Now, which are the modernization challenges in the Indian military? First, the Standing Committee on Defense reported in 2018 that 68% of the Army's equipment is categorized as vintage, which means outdated. Only 24% equipments that we have, they meet the current requirement, and 8% are state of the art, that is we have built it at our home in our country. For example, we are still using the T-72 tanks instead of T-90 tanks. Now, the T-72 tanks, they lack the modern firepower or the capability required to deal with the enemy as giant as China. The equipment, like 70% of the equipments are outdated. Or let's say, for example, with respect to Air Force, we are still using MiG, right? Now, budgetary constraints, despite increased allocations, like for example, if you see every year, our allocation for the defense ministry is increasing. Capital expenditure for defense modernization remains inadequate. Despite the fact that we are spending more and more defense, still we are facing short of capital expenditure, we are facing short of the equipments or infrastructure. Why? For example, let's say recently India has bought S-400 defense missile from Russia and Rafale fighter jets from France. Which means, let's say for example, the defense ministry has 100 rupees. Now the defense ministry has spent 70 rupees for S-400 and Rafale fighter jets. Which means they are only left with 30 rupees to meet the different challenges. For example, when it comes to rifles, we are still using the outdated rifles. We do not have modern rifles. Why? Because much of the money that we have spent is to procure the sophisticated technology, right? So again, because also of the Indian rupee, which is weakening against the US dollar. Now when the Indian rupee is weakening, the import becomes costlier, and this is actually adding pressure on the defense budget. Next is platform deficiencies. The Air Force is operating with only 32 fighter squadrons. Now one squadron would have like around 16 to 18 aircrafts. The authorized strength is 42. We need to have 42 squadrons. Now you multiply 42 into, let's say, 16 or 18. These are the number of fighter crafts or aircrafts that we need, but we only have 32. At the same time, the Navy is facing shortfalls in the aircraft carrier capabilities. Now we only have two. One is Vikramaditya. This is the fighter craft or aircraft carrier that we have. Now what is aircraft carrier? Now aircraft carrier is that equipment or that vessel which has the capability to deploy fighter aircrafts. Now these are nothing but ships, but they are large and huge ships which has the capability to also have, like, let's say 8 to 10 fighter jets, right? And the second one we have is the Vikram. Now the first aircraft carrier, it undergoes regular maintenance. Now the second we have is Vikram. Now again it is falling shortfall. The Navy is falling shortfall with respect to the aircraft carrier capabilities. Manpower shortage. As of 2023, there is a shortage of approximately 1.5 lakh personnel across the three armed services, with Army experiencing the highest deficit of 1.3 lakh personnel. So this is with respect to manpower shortage. So these are some of the challenges. Now let us try to understand what is this ITC, Integrated Theatre Command. They are military formations. Military does not mean only army. Military means Army, Navy and Air Force. These are the military formations that unify the assets and capabilities of the Army, Navy and Air Force under a single command structure. Now, Andaman and Nicobar Island is the only place which has ITC, which means at Andaman and Nicobar Islands, we have the presence of Army, Navy and Air Force. As of now, these three services function independently. Air Force functions independently, right? Army functions independently, Navy independently. Now, under the integrated ITC, what we are going to do is we are going to unify the assets and capabilities of three branches of the Indian Army, which means all these three branches will function under a single command structure. As of now, we only have the Andaman and Nicobar functional ITC, right? The experts have proposed these ITCs in future. For example, let me just show you in the map. So this is how the ITC would look like. Integrated Northern Theatre Command, ITC, which means the presence of Army, Navy and Air Force. Now this Northern Theatre Command would cover Ladakh, Himachal and Uttarakhand. Then Eastern Command would cover Arunachal, Sikkim, Manipur, Mizoram, Nagaland, Assam, Meghalaya, Tripura. Andaman and Nicobar Island, it was created in the year 2003. Then we have the Southern Command, then we have the Western Command, then we have the Logistics Command, then we have the Air Defense Command. These are the proposed ITCs for future. Now you might ask, what is the significance of ITC. For example, let's say the Southern Theatre Command, which includes all the peninsular India, the southern part, right? For example, let's say China attacks the Vizag port of a country. How do we deal with it? Let's say China attacks the Vizag port and Pakistan attacks the, let's say, JNPT port, the Mumbai port, or let's say the Gujarat port. Now here, Pakistan and China both have attacked our country. Now here, our response cannot be isolated one, which means army is dealing with Pakistan in an independent manner, Navy, Air Force. No. Our response has to be holistic, which means the Air Force, Navy and Army should come together to resist the enemy. For that, you need to have practice. It is very important that the Army, Navy and Air Force coordinates. There has to be a coordinated response against our enemy. That's the reason it is very important that we have ITCs, right? Once we have ITCs, based on the strengths and weaknesses of the different branches, we can actually frame a coordinated strategy to deal with our enemy. This is the importance of ITCs. Else, the Navy might have its own plan, Army, Air Force, there is no coordinated plan. So it is very important that you have coordination, strategy to deal with the enemy. Which are the challenges? Inter-services rivalry. Now, the different services, Army, Navy and Air Force, they have different working style. They are different operational cultures. Resource allocation is different. It is very important to address this challenge. Command and control issue. Defining the chain of command. Now, how will be the chain of command? In the ITC, who will lead? Army, Navy or Air Force? Who will lead it? What will be the chain of command is something that we have to decide. Infrastructure and resource allocations. Now, the resources are allocated to different services, right, based on the need, right? Now, here, if we have to establish ITC, substantial investment is required in infrastructure, technology, logistics support, which is currently constrained by budgetary limitations, which means we do not have money to invest significantly in the defense sector. These are some of the challenges in implementing ITCs. So, which are the steps the government of India has taken towards self-reliance in defense? We spent a lot to procure the defense-related equipments, right? Now, as the Indian rupee is weakening against the US dollar, the import is getting more and more costly. What is the solution? You prepare it at your home. Atmanirbhar Bharat initiative, emphasis on indigenization through the Make in India campaign, promoting the development of indigenous defense technologies, which means simple, you make the defense technologies at your home. Second, defense procurement procedure. And this was actually introduced in the year 2020. It prioritizes indigenous manufacturing over foreign procurement, which means the government is focusing on making the defense related equipments in our country and reducing the foreign dependence. Then the establishment of the Chief of Defense Staff. This post was created recently for better coordination among the three services, the CDS. Restructuring defense PSUs. Now, the Ordnance Factory Board. What is this ODF? OBF. Now, this board actually makes defense weapons. Now, this, because of the inefficiency of this board, the government is trying to privatize the Ordnance Factory Board so that the private sector can also step in to procure or make defense equipments. And the last is encouraging R&D and academic collaboration, which means we have to invest significantly in research and development so that the R&D institutions and the academic institutions make the defense equipments at home. They develop their own technology rather than relying on the foreign technology. We make or we develop our own technology so as to meet our country's needs. This is what we have to do to strengthen national security. So, what is the way forward? One, comprehensive analysis, which we discussed in the first article, right? We need to have a comprehensive analysis which should include social, economic, environmental dimensions. accelerated ITC implementation. We have to make sure that the integrated theater command is implemented as soon as possible so that our national security is strong and robust. Focused modernization and acquisition, which means here we have to make sure that the Indian military is modernizing, and for that we have to make sure that the defense equipments are prepared or developed in our home, at our home. Enhanced indigenization efforts, that is developing industrial base in our country, and make sure that you regularly review the ongoing process, right? By adopting or by implementing all these strategies, measures, we make sure that our security is comprehensive and strong. Right, students? I hope you understood each and every dimension in this article, right? Students, the title of the next topic is Ministry of Statistics set to release monthly labor force data. So, in this article, we will understand about the periodic labor force survey and the labor force participation rate. Mark this for GS paper 3. Now, PYQ, besides the welfare schemes, India needs deft management of inflation and unemployment to serve the poor and the underprivileged sections of the society. Discuss. Talks about unemployment and the inflation. Now, what is the context? That is the Ministry of Statistics and Program Implementation. Ministry of Statistics will introduce monthly, the keyword is monthly, labor force survey, periodic labor force survey for both rural and urban areas starting Jan next year. Which means Ministry of Statistics is going to introduce monthly what? Periodic labor force survey for both rural and urban areas. Which means currently this periodic labor force survey is introduced or aggregated quarterly. As of now, we release the data quarterly. Which data? The periodic labor force survey data for both rural and urban. Quarterly, right? Now, this new methodology, what is it? To produce or to release monthly data, monthly periodic labor force data for both rural and urban. So, at present, we release it quarterly. From next year, monthly. What? Periodic labor force survey. Now, let us understand what is this periodic labor force survey. The National Sample Survey Office, which is under the Ministry of Statistics, introduced the Periodic Labor Force Survey PLFS in the year 2017. So, currently it provides quarterly data for both urban areas and annual reports for both rural and urban areas, covering indicators like labor force participation rate, LFPR, WPR, worker population ratio and unemployment rate, which means the periodic labor force survey provides which data? One, the LFPR, second, the worker population ratio, and third one is the unemployment rate. Here you need to understand what is this. The Ministry of Statistics releases periodic labor force survey, right? Under it, you need to understand the meaning of these three terms. Very, very important for your prelims. For example, UPSC might ask a question that the labor force or the periodic labor force survey is released only for rural areas or urban areas. They might confuse you with such statements. So, you need to be very, very particular when it comes to such facts, right? Now, let us try to understand these three indicators under the periodic labor force survey, right? First one is, now this three terms, the LFPR, WPR and unemployment rate, they are the key labor market indicators, right? First one is labor force participation rate. This is the percentage of the population, that is either employed or actively seeking employment. Let's say there are 100 people, 20 people are either employed or seeking employment. This is known as 20% is the labor force participation rate. It reflects the active portion of an economy's workforce. Active portion. Please mug up the definition. Please, very, very important for your prelims examination. What is the significance of LFPR? It indicates that a larger proportion of the working age population is engaged in or looking for economic activities, suggesting higher economic participation, which means if the LFPR is high, which means more people are employed in the employment. Now, UPSC might confuse you with the significance of these three terms. So, you need to understand what is this and the significance. So, if higher is the LFPR, which means more people are employed. Simple. Second is the worker population ratio. It represents the percentage of the working age population that is currently employed, the people who are currently employed. It indicates the extent of employment. Very, very simple. Formula, please mug it up. Significance, now higher WPR means that higher proportion of the population is gainfully employed. Right? Next is unemployment rate. It is the percentage of the labor force that is unemployed or actively seeking work. Please mug up the definition and the formula. Significance, a lower UR means healthier job market. Simple. The interrelationship, LFPR indicates the overall participation of people in the workforce, whether they are doing the job or seeking a job. Labor force participation rate. WPR, it focuses only on the people who are working. The first one, people who are working or seeking employment. Second, only the ones who are working. Third one, the people who are unemployed. This is how you need to understand. I hope you understood all the three terms: LFPR, WPR and UR, and all this falls under the periodic labor force survey, and this survey is released by which ministry? Ministry of Statistics. So if you remember all these things, it will be easy for you to attempt the questions. Students, the title of the next topic is, in a signal to China, Modi says Quad not against anyone but here to stay. Now, in this article, understand about the outcome of the recent Quad summit, right? You can map this under GS paper to international relations. A PYQ, Quad is transforming itself into a trade bloc from a military alliance in present times. Discuss, right? So, here you need to understand about the dimensions under Quad. Now, recently, the Quad Leaders Summit took place in the United States. Among growing global tensions and strategic shifts in the Indo-Pacific region, which means with respect to changing the situation or condition in the Indo-Pacific region and the global tension, this summit was very, very important. First of all, what is Quad? Quadrilateral Security Dialogue, also known as Quad, is a coalition of 4 countries. Which are these 4 countries? India, Australia, US and Japan. There are few commonalities in between these countries. For example, all these 4 countries are a democratic nation and they have a mutual interest in ensuring maritime trade and security is peaceful in the Indo-Pacific region, which means there should be no hindrance or obstacles in the maritime trade and security. This is the mutual interest of all these 4 nations as well as the other nations. This concept of Quad was first proposed by the Japanese Prime Minister in the year 2017. But now in the year 2017, this group revived. Why? Because of the way China is trying to assert herself in the Indo-Pacific region. The way China is threatening other nations, it was important for countries like India and Australia to come together with powerful nations like Japan and USA so as to prevent China. What are the objectives of Quad? 1. Ensuring maritime security and freedom of navigation and overflight in the Indo-Pacific region, right? The Indian Pacific region making sure that maritime security, there is security in the maritime trade, freedom of navigation, right? No country should dominate the Indo-Pacific region and every country should have the freedom of navigation. Next, countering China's influence, addressing China's aggressive actions such as the militarization of the South China Sea. Now, what China has done is, China has actually militarized many of the islands in the South China Sea. Or China is trying to make the region more aggressive, or China is showing her aggressive stance in the Indo-Pacific region. So, to counter it, we all 4 countries have come together to strengthen the regional security. Now, promoting a rules-based international order, which means the international order should be backed by rules. Rules are something that all the countries have to follow to enhance regional security. To make sure everything is smooth and the region is stable and secure, every country should abide by the rules. Economic cooperation, redrawing the global supply chains and promoting economic cooperation in critical technologies, digital infrastructure, health, power and semiconductors, which means in order to make sure that all these countries are cooperating economically, all the 4 countries have come together, which means apart from countering China's aggressive stance in the Indo-Pacific region, right, the countries have also come together for economic development, social development, regional stability. So, if someone will ask you the purpose of Quad, is it only to prevent China? No. Preventing China is one of the many objectives, the other objective being regional stability and maritime security as well as economic development. Now, let us discuss the outcome of the recent Quad summit. First, the strategic and the geopolitical stance. The Quad leaders reaffirmed their commitment to a free, open and inclusive Indo-Pacific region, which means all the countries have the right to use the waters for the international trade. The countries condemned the militarization and coercive, that is aggressive action in the South China Sea by China, right? Which means for the countries, all the countries have criticized China's actions in the South China Sea, the way China is trying to be more and more aggressive and militarize the region. For example, China claims major part of the South China Sea, which means China's territorial claims for 90% of the region in the or area in the South China Sea. Now, the 2016 Arbitral Award rejected China's claim in the South China Sea. They said this Arbitral Award said that what China is claiming is incorrect. China should abide by the international rules. First outcome. Second, the Quad 4 countries launched the Quad Indo-Pacific Logistics Network, aims to enhance disaster response and security cooperation among member countries, and they introduced Maritime Initiative for Training in the Indo-Pacific, this MATRI, to strengthen naval interoperability and maritime security, which means to make sure that the maritime region is stable, secure, so that the trade happening throughout the region or in the region is seamless. The countries have introduced this Maritime Initiative for Training in the Indo-Pacific. The next, Quad Cancer Moonshoot Initiative. Now, again, both the countries have come together to combat cervical cancer in the Indo-Pacific, for which India has pledged 10 million to support digital health infrastructure. Next, economic and technological cooperation. Both the countries, or for the countries, all 4 countries have emphasized cooperation in emerging technologies like machine learning, artificial intelligence, quantum computing, digital infrastructure, educational exchanges, right? Next, global and regional crisis responses. Now, all the 4 countries have expressed concern over the ongoing war in the Ukraine, right? And they have called for comprehensive and just peace. They highlighted the war's impact on global food and energy security. The 4 countries also addressed the humanitarian crisis in Gaza, calling for an immediate ceasefire and release of hostages. Commitment to rule of law and human rights. All the 4 countries supported for the rule of law, sovereignty and human rights. The leaders oppose any unilateral attempts to change the status quo by force or coercion, which means all the 4 countries have said that no country should change the existing situation using force. For example, what China does is, China using force, they try to conquer territories, right? Oppose any unilateral attempts, right, to change the status quo by force in the Indo-Pacific region. And then finally, all the 4 countries advocated for reforms in the UNSC, which means 4 countries realize the importance of reforming the United Nations Security Council, which is the most powerful body in the United Nations, so as to meet the ongoing changes in the world. Which means they emphasize the need for expanding both permanent and non-permanent membership. 5 are permanent members and 10 are non-permanent members in the United Nations Security Council, right? So both the countries or 4 countries have realized the need to expand the membership of the United Nations Security Council to reflect the ongoing changes and ongoing realities, right? I hope you understood the article. Students, the title of the next topic is India-USA Ink Pact to set up semiconductor fabrication plant for national security. In this, we'll understand about the different dimensions under India-US relation, the India Semiconductor Mission and India-US defense types. Important for both prelims as well as GS paper 2 international relations. Mains question: what introduces friction into the ties between India and the US is that Washington, that is US, is still unable to find for India a position in its global strategy which would satisfy India's national self-esteem. Very, very important and beautiful question asked. Right? This was asked in the year 2019, but since 2019, many developments have occurred between or signed between India and the USA, which means today for the US, India is a very, very important strategic partner. Now, both the countries have entered into an agreement to set up semiconductor fabrication plant in India. Now, this plant referred to as Shakti. Now, this term is important for your prelims examination. This Shakti will manufacture advanced semiconductors, which will be used in national security, that is defense equipments, next generation telecommunication and green energy applications. So, semiconductor is a topic which is in the news. So, expect a question on the semiconductors. Now, this plant will produce infrared, gallium nitride and silicon carbide semiconductors, very, very important, which are essential for modern warfare technologies. And these semiconductors are known as compound semiconductors. So, please make sure that you know this fact. Which are the compound semiconductors? Very important for your prelims examination. And this is the first technology partnership between the Indian businessmen and the US businessmen, which have facilitated by the India Semiconductor Mission. It also marks the first Quad collaboration in the semiconductor fabrication, which means, again, though this agreement was signed between India and USA, but as India and USA are part of the Quad, it marks the collaboration in the semiconductor industry by the Quad, or Quad is engaged in the semiconductor development. Importance: it is hailed as a breakthrough, which the agreement signed between both the nations. Now, this agreement signed between both the nation in the semiconductor production is compared with the India-US civil nuclear deal signed in the year 2005, which means in the first article we discussed that we import a lot many defense equipments from the foreign country, and as the Indian rupee is weak, the import bill surges, right? Now, in this agreement, this will help India to manufacture or develop semiconductors in our country thereby reducing our import bill, right? India-US civil nuclear deal signed in the year 2005. This actually helped India to develop nuclear energy in our country, which means all the equipments, the reactor, nuclear fuel, ENR technology required to make the nuclear fuel or energy, USA helped India. Now, by India being a part of the development of semiconductor, India will join an elite group of nations like US, Russia, China that manufacture these critical components, right? Which means this move will make India a trusted and stable supply chain partner for the USA, which means when it comes to the supplies of these semiconductors, USA can rely India to ensure that these semiconductors are supplied seamlessly without any obstacles. Now, both the countries also signed or deepened their strategic and defense cooperation. Now, all these points, students, it will help you understand how India and USA are deepening their ties. Both the countries are strategic partners. They engage in political partnerships, security, environment, social development, educational, science and tech, space cooperation. So, which means the engagement is deepening year on year. Now, both the countries are agreed to advance cooperation in new areas like sharing threat information in the Indo-Pacific. Why? Because the USA have more advanced satellites, cyber security training and mitigating vulnerabilities in energy and telecommunications network. Next, defense cooperation. The US welcomed the India's procurement, that is, India has bought this 31 MQ-9B remotely piloted aircraft, drones. And this India will use to enhance India's intelligence, surveillance and reconnaissance capabilities across all military domains, which means through these drones, this will help our country to get intelligence, all right, or any security threat that we are facing or we are witnessing in the Indo-Pacific or India-Pakistan border, India-China border, likewise. Then both the countries are also cooperating to co-produce jet engines, munitions and ground mobility systems. Then both the countries are again cooperating to co-develop and co-produce unmanned surface vehicle system. Again, they are also collaborating in space and maritime areas. So, all these points will help you understand that both the countries are actually deepening their engagement, right? So, if you get a question on India-USA mains question, then you need to make sure that you are focusing on the different dimensions between India and USA with an example each, right? That's it from this article. Friends, it's now time to discuss few questions. First one is regarding ITCs. ITCs aim to unify the operational capabilities of the Army, Navy and Air Force under a single commander to enhance joint military effectiveness. Exactly. This is what we understood by the term ITC. Second, Andaman and Nicobar Command is the only existing tri-services command in India serving as the precursor to the proposed ITCs. Yes, exactly. Even this statement is correct. Very easy question. Next question, the Quad is a strategic coalition of 4 democratic countries, India, Australia, US and Japan. Yes. The concept of the Quad was first proposed in 2017 as a response to China's assertive actions, first proposed in the year 2007. So, this one is incorrect. Third, the Quad was originally proposed by Japanese Prime Minister in 2007 but stalled after Australia's withdrawal. Yes, this one is also correct. 1 in 3. Option B is the correct answer for question number 2. Next is with respect to periodic labor force survey. It was launched by Ministry of Statistics in 2017. Yes, correct. Currently, the PLS data is collected monthly. No, it is collected quarterly and aggregated annually for both rural and urban areas. Incorrect. The labor force participation measures the percentage of the working age population that is currently employed. See, The labor force participation rate, it measures the percentage of the working age population that is currently employed or seeking employment. So this one is incorrect, which means A has to be the only correct answer for question number 3. India entered into an agreement recently to set up semiconductor fabrication plant referred to as Shakti. With which of the following country? US. Very simple. Let's discuss a means practice question. Discuss the challenges in formulating comprehensive NSS for India. How these challenges be addressed to ensure robust and effective strategy? First of all, in the introduction, explain what is NSS. Right? National Security Strategy definition is expected to mention in the introduction. Right? You can also mention the countries that have a NSS, and why it is important for a country to have a comprehensive NSS is what you mention in the introduction. Body, highlight the challenges, or before challenges, you can also mention that the NSS should include following dimensions: aims and objectives, short-term and long-term planning, and then you come to the challenges part. For example, political sensitivities, right? The national security issues might get more controversial. Resource constraints, we do not have resources to invest more in the defense capabilities or upgradation of technology. Dynamic security environment, institution coordination, that is coordination between different ministries. Now there is a challenge. Why? Because of the bureaucratic hurdles and the different priorities of different ministries. Then how do you challenge? By ensuring, for example, we have the confidential drafting. We make sure that the NSS is drafted and in a very secret manner, right? It should not be revealed, but the security experts should only have the access of the NSS. Prioritization, based on the security threat, we have to prioritize which sector needs more resources. Adaptive planning, we have to make sure that the NSS is flexible so that as per the changing regional and global geopolitical landscape, we also change the NSS. And then strengthening coordination between different ministries and different departments, right? And then finally, in the solution, you have to mention that given the threats India is facing, or given the increasing threats India is facing, it is very important that we frame a robust, comprehensive NSS so as to deal with the emerging challenges. This is how you frame the answer. I hope students you understood how you need to write the answer, right? So this is it, students. Make sure that you are thorough with each and every article. Make sure you are revising it. Make sure you are rehearsing it, writing it, right? So that all the concepts gets embedded in your mind, right? So that's it from today's DNA session. Please support our initiative by liking, sharing and subscribing Narayana IAS. Thank you so much.